I never entirely fit in at the Post. They were the writers, not me. That is, I was a writer by title, and eventually by trade, but it was the rest of them, especially Gruber and Julius, our philosopher and the poet. Julius wasn't a poet as I had thought of him. There's no moody pretension about him. I expected a frail, sensitive soul misusing large words to show the depth of his spiritual pain. But Julius. Reporting involves a lot of waiting. Waiting for contacts to call, waiting to be copy edited, waiting for the mail, the telegram, the papers. When we had time to kill, you could usually see Julius at his desk, pad of paper in his hand. He'd stare at his window and his pen would just jot out couplets or odes. Never looked at them until they were finished. I couldn't talk like Julius or reason like Gruber. They were at home in the newsroom, but it choked me like gun smoke. I had to get outside, keep moving, keep digging. As a boy, I was fixated on the water. I used to spend most of my time sitting beside a stream, listening to it burble. Watching a lake lap its shores is the best thing I knew. When I'm in silence, I think. Worry. Next to water, though, I can't keep a thought in my head. They just skitter away out to sea. It was what I missed during the war. The only water there was fetid, still. The closest it came was rainfall on our line of helmets. Not much, but enough. Those little moments of sanity. So when I felt stifled, I'd always end up on the banks of the Izar. That night, I sat beneath an elm. Still can't smoke at night. Keep telling myself, there's no snipers. Fear's a funny thing. There was a crowd. Somewhere on the other banks, I couldn't see them, but there was a faint roar and an electric hum of loudspeakers. Finding it proved more difficult than I expected. Sound moved strangely in those alleys. If I were a sniper, I'd be doomed. No way I'd find a muzzle flash in time. I ran to the corner. There they were. 300-400 people mad as hell. Floodlights and blood-red banners. Then we faded the crowd having communist rage. France, Britain, at the direction of the Republic. There was chaotic energy and it danced in time with the speaker.
They ask us to change our ways, to grovel at the feet of Europe, and your leaders in the Reichstag agree.
His words acted like a spell.
Why should we be made to follow the dictates of lesser nations? Because cowards in their universities have no stomach for the fight? Because they abandoned those philosophies that made Germany great?
Whether he was their master or slave, there was no way to tell.
It was a German monk who ended the corruption of Rome. It was a German printing press that put a Bible on every mantle.
It struck me as nothing so much as a pit bull grasping in its jaws its own leash.
And for 1,000 years, everywhere was the righteous might of Germany respected and feared.
Chaos sharpened with his speech, disparate shouts became cohesive.
As a German nation, we were strong. Under atheists and immigrants, we beg for bread.
It was terrifying and awe-inspiring.
Let us send a message. We will not abandon our country, though our country has abandoned us. We will rebuild it as it once was. Another Hitler. Germany will tower above Europe for another 1,000 years.
An eruption, cheers and chants.
Wow! He's so right!
It makes some interesting arguments.
I know! I never thought about it like that, but he makes a lot of sense, you know? I'm Alfred.
Ulrich.
Not from around here, are you?
Guilty as charged. I grew up in Brandenburg.
A Prussian? Remind me not to piss you off. Still got a bit of the accent there. You been to one of these before?
No, I was just passing by. Thought I'd take a listen.
You know, a couple of us are heading to the pub afterwards. New faces are always welcome.
Poetry or reporting?
Reporting, Herr Gruber.
Liar. As long as it's on my desk by morning, I'm going home.
Good night, sir.
Oh, pass me a picture and sing me a song. My lady, hearts that are pretty and hearts can't be wrong. Do my lady do.
Fun night?
I'd put down my pitcher if you asked me to dance. Do my lady do. Love isn't dice, or leave it to chance. Do my lady.
Would you mind? I'm trying to write.
Our imaginary trees not inspiring your artistic soul. Don't worry. I'm sure Gruber will understand. I mean, you finished your articles, haven't you? Have you? Better get cracking. Well, do disappoint.
At least I've been in the office, not out getting drunk.
I'll have you know I was out getting drunk with not-so-rednecks, which makes it, you know, research.
We're out drinking.
You heard me. Maybe Al will reimburse me.
So, what happened?
You know how it is. You walk across a rally. You get invited to post races and drinks. Next thing you know, you're listening to drunken redneck gossip.
That sounds awful. I hope you weren't buying.
Of course I was. I will remind you, I was raised to be a gentleman. Anyway, fascinating. First, what if Hitler's a movie star to these kids. I sat next to him in the car. Only stayed for a week with my uncle while we lived for a month at my boss's lake house, on and on, listening to them brag about the people they know who have hosted the school.
I really am trying to do real work.
Let me ask you one question, and you can tell me if I've been working.
Fine.
What does our dear Adolf do for a living? What does he do for a living? Exactly. So who pays for his cars? And his food and fancy beers? The man of the people lives in the lap of luxury, but on whose dime?
Edmund, that's beautiful.
Julius could write. I have one of his books. It's practically the first thing he published once he fled the country in '34. Mine is one of the few German copies to have escaped the bonfires, but it wasn't the book burnings that stung him. Actually, I'm pretty sure those were a source of pride. It was the response.
Dachau, a chronicle, is a collection of fabrications written by a man who is politically motivated, mentally unstable, or both. The camp at Dachau is a thriving community, brought there safely and humanely from those parts of German society where they can do the most damage.
A mistruth so bold, so blatant, that it gains traction through sheer temerity. No one would lie that poorly we say. He must believe it. There must be some truth to it. It was one of Hitler's favorites. He learned to keep his threats veiled after his failure in '23.